Before Prohibition, the concept of organized crime wasn't distinctly recognized in the U.S. While criminal groups had been causing chaos in urban centers since the late 1800s, they primarily consisted of roughnecks executing minor extortion and loansharking operations within specific ethnic locales like Italian, Jewish, Irish, and Polish sectors. Interestingly, prior to the adoption of the 18th Amendment in 1919, and the subsequent nationwide prohibition starting January 1920 on the distribution or import of intoxicating beverages, the most structured criminal endeavors weren't helmed by mob figures. Instead, they were orchestrated by crooked political leaders, points out Howard Abedinsky, a scholar in criminal justice at St. John's University and the writer of Organized Crime. These gangs acted as enforcers for political entities, according to Abedinsky. Their duties? Intimidate rival candidates and secure votes for their patron. In reciprocity, the political figureheads and top cops would conveniently overlook illicit gambling and prostitution activities. Yet, the balance in the criminal realm drastically tipped with the advent of Prohibition, and the sudden banning of all alcoholic beverages across the nation. With the closure of authentic bars and brewing factories, someone needed to satiate the rampant demand during the lively era of the Roaring Twenties. Who better to step up than the mob? The mob enters the boardroom. According to Abedinsky, the crux of a prosperous bootlegging venture was having a paramilitary structure. Initially, these gangs lacked business acumen but had proficiency in handling firearms and bullying rivals. They could guard illicit distilleries and smuggle operations from opposing factions, ensure safety for secret bars, and conveniently bribe inquisitive officers or political figures. Soon, these gangsters were accumulating staggering wealth, with authority figures now heeding their commands. As the cash flow surged, these once petty street hooligans had to evolve. They sought the expertise of lawyers and accountants to cleanse the vast sums of dirty money accumulating constantly. Considerations about alliances with different factions, shipping details, and property investments became paramount. They transformed into entrepreneurs, Abedinsky notes. This metamorphosis birthed what we today identify as organized crime. Before the Prohibition era, crime syndicates were simply local nuisances, extorting neighborhood ventures and venturing into smaller illegal operations. Yet, the expansive lure of illicit liquor reshaped the landscape. Notably, the act of acquiring and supplying alcohol often transcended state and international boundaries. For gangs to ensure consistent supplies and optimize earnings, working in silos wasn't an option. This newfound scenario had crime bosses collaborating, notes Abedinsky. This led to the creation of cross-border and cross-cultural defense alliances to guarantee an uninterrupted supply of illicit spirits to urban hubs. These were inherently aggressive individuals, typically resorting to lethal means to tackle challenges. But the circumstances now had them negotiating and stating, "Assure tranquility in our region, and we'll do the same for yours." This form of alliance is what we term syndicated crime, a collaboration among criminal factions, Abedinsky emphasizes. Had it not been for Prohibition, such a comprehensive criminal network might never have emerged. Prohibition was indeed the driving force. The struggle for dominance ensues. During the 1920s, Charles Lucky Luciano gained notoriety for unifying prominent Italian and Jewish crime lords to oversee New York's clandestine liquor trade. Meanwhile, in Chicago, Johnny Torrio orchestrated a delicate truce between his South Side Italian-run moonshine business and the North Side's Irish and Polish factions. However, this peace was ephemeral. Once Al Capone, Torrio's successor, stepped in, rivalries escalated. The notorious St. Valentine's Day Massacre in 1929 bore testament to this, as Capone's crew, disguised as policemen, executed 7 adversaries. Several of the most successful bootlegging ventures during Prohibition transported illicit spirits from Canada via the expansive Great Lakes. The notorious Arnold Rothstein, infamous for rigging the 1919 World Series, managed a route that coursed through Lake Ontario, reaching the Hudson River and then dispersing to New York City's abundant speakeasies. Meanwhile, Cleveland's Mayfield Road Gang garnered attention with their fleet of speedy boats, frequently navigating Lake Erie. Mob leaders raked in hefty profits. The insatiable appetite for banned beer, wine, and spirits during Prohibition meant criminal masterminds like Capone were netting upwards of $100 million annually by the mid-1920s, equivalent to $1.4 billion in 2018. These figures don't even account for the staggering $500,000 they distribute monthly as bribes to law enforcement, politicians, and federal officials. Earning vast sums wasn't the challenge, the dilemma, as Abedinsky points out, was managing this immense wealth. The era necessitated the evolution of sophisticated money laundering mechanisms for the organized crime world. When Nevada sanctioned gambling in 1931, a deluge of mob funds from the Prohibition period flowed into the burgeoning casinos and hotels. Mafia financiers like Meyer Lansky channeled funds to Swiss brokers who would camouflage the criminal origins and redirect the finances into lawful enterprises. Some, like Capone, lacked this foresight and faced incarceration for evading taxes. With the termination of Prohibition in 1933, the surge of illicit money tapered, but the intricate underground trade mechanisms and financial subterfuge techniques established by the Mafia persisted. Leading crime syndicates pivoted from alcohol to other lucrative ventures like narcotics, gambling, and prostitution. Their monetary power was further magnified during the Great Depression. In an economy starved for cash, the mob had liquidity, Abedinsky remarks. To establish a genuine enterprise, one had to seek the Mafia's financial aid. Thus, loansharking emerged as a dominant trade. Reflecting upon it, the irony becomes evident: Prohibition, conceived as a crusade to rectify America's vices, inadvertently seeded one of its most formidable criminal legacies.